Ugh. Okay, fingers crossed that I get this finished done. Okay. I've been trying to shoot this video for a while. Keeps going wrong. It's like someone's trying to stop me from telling you this information. But in all honesty, I've tried cannabis, and I think that's a good way of saying it, because I did try it. I'm not a consistent user of cannabis, but that might change when it comes to me taking it 4 times a year. Or 6. Does that count as consistent? Probably not consistent enough. When I say the word consistent, you're probably thinking every single day. But that comes with its drawbacks, not only with your spiritual practices such as meditation, astral projection, and or dreaming, but also personality-wise, it will make you slow. I've seen this happen within my friends, my friendship circle growing up. I watched them start and I watched them degrade as people. They become less attentive. Their memory is shot. And I'm not going to be one of those guys who just tells you all of this without, experiencing it, without being that voice of expertise. Meaning I've gone through a series of experiences and I can tell you from my experience the benefits and the drawbacks. Okay? So let's go into storytime mode. Because I used to take cannabis pretty much every single day for about a month to a month and a half straight, because I knew a dealer back when I was 16. He would come home and he would take off his hat and there'll be like 8 ounces right there, right? So we'd start smoking and I'd start laughing. I would get drowsy, I'd lay down, become lazy, and I'd eat everything in the house. Saying it like that just reminds me of how naive I was some time ago before I started experimenting with cannabis again. Because back then I thought that cannabis made you these things, and I labeled cannabis with those attributes, that this was the cannabis plant. But the reality is cannabis doesn't do those things to you. No, cannabis does way more than that. And none of that. Because cannabis should really be seen as a psychedelic. It should be within the psychedelic family, not within the tobacco family. With the other cigarettes, the Marlboros and the Amber Leafs and stuff like that. It will make sense in a second, okay? So, I'm at the beach. This was probably about a month ago. I decided to pick up, after 10 years or more, cannabis once again. And I'm smoking it, right? I'm passing it. And I'm observing as to what's happening to me, I'm observing the fact that I'm a bit paranoid. And I freeze. And I think, why am I paranoid? What's going on? And I feel into it, and it feels old, like old paranoia. And then I'm able to link a moment from my past to that state of being. When I was in school, I was paranoid. And then after school, I'll go onto the streets and I'll be paranoid. It's bringing out in me, seamlessly, this paranoia. And then I think, oh, okay. So it doesn't make people paranoid. Now, I can say this as a personal truth. I'm just one person with a crazy amount of awareness studying this plant's effects on my psychology and my physiology. And so, yeah, I'm relaxed. But I'm also a little tense. It's weird. It's like my legs are jelly, but my shoulders are tight. And I'm looking around, and then I freeze, and I meditate it out. And I deal with my childhood anxiety on the spot. Strikingly fast, actually. It was weirdly fast. And then I noticed how I would shift into a funny character very quickly. Now, I'm quite wacky anyway. If you get to know me, I do strange things. I will jump around on objects. It's happened so many times. So I'm kind of a silly belly every now and then. I just like to be myself. And this substance had me being myself to the extreme. In moments, I would just burst into different characters. I would burst into weird weird jokes, and it was the amount of flow I had with the jokes was seamless. Usually, when someone says a joke, they're like, "Was that funny?" or they cut themselves off in between saying the joke, and they overthink it or they back out of a joke. But this was fluid, and everyone was laughing, and I thought, "Wow, this is some good stuff." It wasn't making me funny. It was bringing out what was already funny within me, just at a extreme rate. Okay, and so I'm like, okay, that was weird. And then I forget the joke I just told because my memory sucks. It just cuts out, and I turn to my girlfriend and I say, "This has just made me like, wait, what was I thinking?" I said, my mind just cut out a bunch of information. And she said, "Oh, it's weird you noticed that, that you're able to make the connection." And so I was like, "Yeah, that was strange." Then the character shifting stopped happening because I started to notice shadows on the beach, pink orbs flying past me. And I kept seeing this woman behind my friend, who was actually a fan who met me in Brighton. We we exchanged numbers, and I hooked up with him after his shift. And behind him, someone was standing there. A woman was standing there, just like this, and then she would be gone. And I'm like, okay. Now I'm noticing that everything that I usually notice within space, people, ghosts, entities, shadows, and orbs have become extra, which is a word that my girlfriend told me to use to describe what was happening. It makes a lot of sense because after a while, I couldn't just see the woman behind this guy, I could also hear her and a crowd of people that weren't actually there. I could hear them. And then, while standing on the beach, I could see another dimension, then it was gone. And then I could see it again, then it was gone. It was like I was in 3D 1 second, then I was in another dimension the next second. It was kind of like having a strobe light to your face, and it's flashing black and white, black and white, black and white, only with the dimensions they were flashing before my eyes. This dimension, and this other one that kind of looked like if you were to stand on top of a castle and see a bunch of bricks, and that was it. Then I noticed really what this substance was. It was a psychedelic. It increases everything inside you that you already are. Think about it, okay? Every day, people get hungry, they get a little bit paranoid, they get anxious, they get happy, they get sad, okay? They're very talkative 1 second, and then they're very introverted, and they're in their head a lot. Depending on where you are, if somebody gave you cannabis, those attributes of your character will be heightened, period. That's what it does. It heightens things. And by the looks of things, at least from my perspective, it puts people, including myself, in between worlds. It puts people in between worlds. Can I say that for sure? About others, as a personal truth, yeah. About others, not so much, because I've seen some people say, that, hey, it's laced. They just discredit other people's experiences by saying that the cannabis was laced. I don't believe that. I believe that it's a psychedelic based on my observations, and that depending on whether or not you're blocked off to this side of reality, these other sides of existence, will depend on whether or not you actually experience those dimensions on cannabis. It quickened my ability to process out my issues, my anxiety. At one point, I actually noticed myself shifting into a character that was a mirror image of a friend that I'd seen within my past. And the reason as to why I'd shifted into that character was because I believed on a subconscious level that it was necessary to behave like him whilst under the influence of cannabis. I literally caught myself thinking that and behaving, executing his way of speaking, his posture, everything, even how he squinted his eyes. And so I nipped that in the bud straight away because that's not who I am and I don't need to behave that way. And so, especially when I realized how it was affecting the people around me, very quickly you become aware of these things, but only if, like I said, you already had the awareness to begin with. God, that's my stomach. It's the weed. When we finished on the coastline of Brighton, we decided to go back to our hotel, and the hotel was this retro-y 70s, brightly colored pink and blue decorum outfitted room. It was very nice. But under the influence, kind of seemed like a spaceship. Okay, now this wasn't actually happening, of course. It just reminded us of a spaceship, and because everything's extra whilst on cannabis, that thought got out of hand. She also thought that the LED light that was fixed to the ceiling was a camera. At this point, it peaked. The cannabis peaked. And I noticed that I was no longer shifting into characters that were of my own design. Whilst on ayahuasca, I ended up developing the ability to channel beings, human and or otherwise. Sounds strange, I know, but I'm quite open to these things. I could do some other things too, which after using cannabis for a while also became extra, using it for meditation purposes, which is why I'm saying that I'm probably going to use it about 4 to 6 times a year. There are 365 days in the year, so that won't be bad at all. And as long as I'm not doing it every single day, survey says that my memory shouldn't diminish, my dream time shouldn't get crappy or non-existent, and I should be all good. So I use it for meditation nowadays, and back in Brighton I ended up channeling beings. But the issue was that when I was on ayahuasca channeling beings, I had control as to whether or not these things could move my body or use my voice. On cannabis, I had no control. I would shift and move from one side of the room to the other side of the room as a different person. Not pretending to be a different person. I made sure to think about that. I was observing my mind and just witnessing what was happening. It got weird. At one point I decided to act like a character just to see the difference. Yeah, I was being channeled a lot, and even throughout the night I was being channeled. I'd wake up in the middle of the night as someone else and then go back to sleep. So I've had some other experiences on cannabis. I used it for meditation about 2 weeks after my girlfriend came to visit, and I was laying down and this being was moving my physical body, and I could feel energy coming up out of the body and out of the mouth, and it was really cleansing a lot of this energy that I'd accumulated over the past month, which was quite interesting. And even now I can recreate the motion of my body, which will then trigger the energy to come out of my mouth. But one more thing before I close down. I just failed to click just then. When I was on the beach, after I'd heard that crowd of people that existed within the other dimension whilst I was flickering in and out of dimensions, I also saw to my right a man, a green man, not an alien, just the torso of a man. And that was happening in conjunction with this energy that was being shooted up the front of my body, and then it was spinning here and making me wobble off balance. I was feeling that, and I could see him in my peripheral. Then he started doing this and corkscrewing pink energy out of my head, out of my waist, out of my knees, just below the knees, maybe about 5 inches below, and about 2 inches below my ankles. He was corkscrewing it out of my body. He had 4 arms, okay, no facial features. His head was kind of triangle-y, and he was green, like a neon green with a pink tint. So that was my experience whilst on cannabis. I do not condone the use of cannabis long term because of the detrimental effects it can have on one's psychology and on their body, their brain. I also want to bring up the fact that because it makes everything extra, this also includes your ego, your character. I know I've mentioned this before when it came to me being quirky and funny, you know. But I specifically wanted to mention it again in regard to the whole gangster mentality that comes along with people taking cannabis. A lot of the time, people get introduced to cannabis whilst they've been influenced into that personality complex. And so you'll see a lot of people smoking weed and, saying slang words and stuff like that and cuss words, and it makes them worse when they smoke weed. Over a long period of time, I theorize that based on the person who believes that they are their own character, and based on the permanent effects that can, or seemingly permanent effects that can happen as of a result of taking cannabis, which is being slow, being hungry, constantly being paranoid, even whilst being offered the substance, that shifting out of that character, that ego complex, will become very difficult because it has been cemented within a person's being due to them changing their brain chemistry, and whilst changing their brain chemistry, being under the assumption that they are that character. So if your ego gets louder and you're smoking for a long period of time and you believe that you are your ego, the detrimental effects may possibly make it very difficult for you to break out of that ego long term. Even after you stop smoking it and you start getting on the up and up, you start repairing the issues, you start being able to dream again. Maybe, not maybe, I've seen it in people. It's very hard for them to shift out of that character. Now, why would you want to shift out of a character? Well, your character deals with the way that you speak to people and how you operate throughout life. And if your relationships are getting bad because you're not saying the right words, or you're just messing up, it's you. You're behaving incorrectly, inappropriately. And maybe you want to be better as a person. It's going to be very difficult for you to do that if you're locked into an idea that you are this certain way. And so, just something to think about. I'm Ryan JC, Ryan James Cropper. This has been Your Potential. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos like this. I'm speaking really fast. I'm going to slow way down. And I'll speak to you all pretty soon. Peace.